I'd like to start a vlog today. I have some very fun things that I would like to do this month, and I feel like it would be really fun to vlog those and take you along with me, and also show you some of the things that I'm reading as well. And tonight I'm actually going to a concert, and last weekend I also went to a concert. Bruce and I saw The Killers, and it was a really fun show. They actually opened with Mr. Brightside, and that was a big surprise. But yes, a very fun show. And then tonight we're gonna watch a band called The Warning, and it's a Mexican band made up of three sisters, and they're just so cool. So yeah, I'm very excited, and I will definitely show some footage of that, hopefully. Yeah, so what I'm reading right now mainly is An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I'm really enjoying this. I'm about halfway through, so I'm hoping to finish it this weekend and tell you more of my thoughts on it. And then the audiobook that I'm listening to right now is Invitation to a Banquet by Fuchsia Dunlop. And this is a history of Chinese food. And I'm just finding it so fascinating. It's such a cool thing to learn about a different culture through their food. And it's also inspiring me to pick up some of my cookbooks from Fuchsia Dunlop and trying to make some of those dishes. And so I'm hopefully going to feature some of the stuff that I'll make from those. Maybe also some baking, some walks in the park, things like that. We'll see. I have a lot of ideas, so we'll see what I end up doing. But I think that would be really fun. So hopefully you'll come along for the ride. Sunday, it's the next day. Yesterday the concert was a lot of fun. I had a really good time, and I was also able to get some reading in during the day, and so I only have about 40 pages left in An Artist of the Floating World. So I definitely want to finish this today and give you my final thoughts on it, but I actually haven't talked about this yet in the vlog, so I need to introduce it as well. So this follows Mr. Ono, who was a political painter during World War II in Japan, and this starts out in October 1948. And so he's really kind of grappling with the aftermath of World War II and how things are really changing a lot. And you also get the sense that there are things that he kind of needs to come to terms with that he was involved in the past. But they're very much alluded to. They're not addressed directly. And you slowly start to understand the implications of those things and to learn what those were. And I really love the way that this opens. The beginning paragraph is one of those really wonderful paragraphs that just kind of sticks with you, I think. So I want to read it. If on a sunny day you climb the steep path leading up from the little wooden bridge, still referred to around here as the Bridge of Hesitation, you will not have to walk far before the roof of my house becomes visible between the tops of two ginkgo trees. Even if it did not occupy such a commanding position on the hill, the house would still stand out from all others nearby, so that as you come up the path, you may find yourself wondering what sort of wealthy man owns it. But then I am not, nor have I ever been, a wealthy man. And I just love that. I just think it's beautiful. It gives you this really interesting expectation with that visual of the Bridge of Hesitation. Yeah, and so I'm really enjoying this process of getting to know our main character and to understand him as a person, um, and about these different things that he's dealing with. He has his older daughter is married, and his younger daughter is trying to get married. She is 26 when this is taking place, and they had an engagement that fell through. That's one of the things that sort of happens in the book, or is explained in the book, where the family kind of pulled out, and it's kind of implied that the reason they gave is not the real reason. And so there's this confusion and sort of awkwardness around that topic, because the implication is that it's because of Mr. Ono's past associations. And then it takes off from there. And she has a new engagement that they are negotiating. And because it's negotiated between the families, that's also a big thing that's happening during this. And at one point, Mr. Ono is asserts that he is working hard to progress the negotiations and have the engagement come through. But his daughter is also very anxious about it, and it's something that has them all very stressed out. And he feels that she resents him and kind of lashes out at him, saying that in his retirement, since he's retired, he has become very lazy and has too much free time and doesn't occupy himself and is not doing enough to help. And he asserts that he's doing all these things, and now in hindsight he admits that he felt that the right thing was to not tell her about the specific things that he was trying to do in order to keep her from stressing out. But he admits now that maybe the kinder thing would have been to just let her know. And it's a small thing, but I really enjoy those kinds of things, those moments of tension in relationships where you have miscommunication, you have missed opportunities and things like that. Yeah. So it's a very gently and slowly told story. Granted, the underlying things are quite heavy, with the war, but it's exploring a lot of different things. There's also this strong sense of generational differences, and along with that, repeating patterns. He interacts with his young grandson, and he very much wants to have a connection with him, but the young grandson has these influences that are so different. And so there's one point where he is Ichiro is the grandson. He's sort of pretending to be something, and Mr. Ono doesn't understand what it is, and he's like, "Oh, are you playing samurai?" And the grandson's like, "No, I'm a cowboy." And so you have that American influence coming in too after World War II. And so he's kind of struggling to create that bond, that connection with him. And it's interesting because the way that he is able to is by playing up these sort of misogynist views, which is very frustrating, but also feels very real. And so it's just an interesting component to their relationship, because there's a new movie that just came out that Ichiro is very interested in, and it's not named, but it's clearly Godzilla, and Mr. Ono wants to take him to watch it because he's like, oh, he'll be really excited about that, and he wants to go see it. And the way that he expresses that kind of like extra bit of bonding is by making fun of his aunt, the younger daughter, by saying, oh, she'll be so scared, women can't handle scary things and stuff like that. And that kind of thing is repeated quite a few different times. So yeah, frustrating, but one of those interesting components that also feels real. And one thing that I really love about Kazuo Ishiguro's novels, in all the other ones I've read too, is just his writing and the use of simple metaphors. There's a part where Mr. Ono is talking to a past apprentice of his in his own house, and he's kind of looking out on his garden and it's starting to snow. And so as he's talking to him, the apprentice is telling him that he is trying to get this new job. And as he's applying, though, he is finding it necessary to ask Mr. Ono if he is applied to please admit to having had differing opinions in the past. And as he's telling him this, Mr. Ono is looking out on his garden, and you get this description of how he is looking at different things in the garden slowly piling up with snow. And so it's this very slow accumulation of the snow on top of bushes and you know, these different decorative things out there. And I just love that image of that dawning realization of, you know, it's a negative thing to be associated with him, and he has this very strong pride in his past accomplishments. And so it's, you know, it's one of those kind of important moments, but at the same time being very quiet. You know, it's a simple kind of metaphor, but I just love that kind of thing. And yeah, I'm still really enjoying it, and I only have a little bit left, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish it now. I've now finished reading An Artist of the Floating World, and I enjoyed this a lot. It is very much my kind of book. And yeah, so in those last 40 pages, you really do get to know a lot more about Mr. Ono and his past, his education, and there's a bit more about art itself. There's this really interesting sort of discussion going on about the difference between fine art and more commercial art, and also like propaganda, and where the line is between those things, and then the sort of subject matter that is allowed to be considered fine art versus not. And that's not something that's like deeply discussed, but it's something that comes up, and I love that that was part of it, because it very much fits a lot of the things that are being discussed in the book overall. So that was very enjoyable. And then also, along with the idea of like the generational differences, there's this parallel with how he talks about apprenticeships, specifically to do with art. And so you'll have the master teaching his pupils, and eventually the pupils will reach a point where they start to grow into their own ideas and develop themselves beyond what they're being taught. And that's definitely something that happens with your own children. Of course, they reach a certain age where they start to develop their own ideas, and maybe they differ from yours, and they want different things than you do, and that inevitably creates a certain kind of tension, and it can result in still having a very good relationship, or it can cause a break. And so that was also very interesting, sort of parallel, and he experienced that multiple times as he progressed in his career. There's also very much right at the end, you know, discussions about what makes for not necessarily a life worth living, but more the difference between feeling satisfied and fulfilled with the things that you achieved in life versus regret. Which I think it's interesting, because I think I mentioned in a different video that in some ways this reminded me of The Remains of the Day, and I do think that it's similar in that sense of, you know, it's a character study of an older person looking back on their lives and considering their past deeds, and sort of changing their point of view on things, maybe reassessing some things, and coming to terms with regret, and if they have regrets, and you know, what is worthy of regretting, what isn't, and ideas like that. So yes, I enjoyed this quite a bit, actually. I think it's one of those very quiet things that just sort of sits, but I think I'm gonna probably continue to think about some of the things in here in the coming days, and I love that kind of thing. Very happy to have read that. And then I definitely want to start something else today. I think I would like to sample some things I have on my Kindle, and then let you know what I pick later. But I am gonna let you know that I am leaning heavily towards, I think it's called Second Place by Rachel Cusk, and it's gonna be my first Rachel Cusk. So I'm excited about that. And then later today, I'm thinking about making some Mapo tofu, so I would love to show you that when it's ready. And then maybe also doing some sketching and showing you a bit of that as well. So yeah. It is now Thursday the 19th, and I'd like to do a little check-in. And so I'm going to start by showing you some of the drawings that I've been working on. So I only managed to record part of the process as I worked on these drawings over a few different days, and so I do want to show you how they all came out in the end. And all of them are based on artworks from art books that I own, and so I do want to mention each of them specifically. And this latest drawing that I worked on is from a J.C. Leyendecker art book that is so gorgeous, and the painting that it's based on is called Vacation. And I just love these ladies. They just look like they cannot be bothered. So I'd like to give you a little tour of this sketchbook because there aren't too many drawings in it yet, but I'm really happy with how it's coming out. So it mostly has portraits like this. So they're artwork made by other artists, and I've made little studies based on them. And I'm really enjoying the way they're coming out. This is the one Outlier, these little cats. I really like the way they came out. And then this is the one that I worked on the other day. You saw me working on this one, so this is how this one came out. And this one is from a John Singer Sargent book called Portraits in Charcoal. And this one on the other side is actually also by Sargent, but I found that one online, so I'm not sure if that one's in the book as well. And this is the latest one. Also very happy with this one. And I have one more drawing I'd like to show you, and it is this spread I actually made earlier in the weekend. So this one is based on 3 photos from an art book called The Art of Movement, which I really, really love. It is a ballet photography book that also features a lot of fashion, and the poses are incredible, the lighting is incredible, and so it's beautiful to look at, but it's also a really great resource for artists to draw from. So yeah, I'm very happy with this one as well. I hope you enjoyed looking at all the drawings I made. So you'll have seen me make that Mapo tofu the other night, and that was actually from this cookbook, Every Grain of Rice by Fuchsia Dunlop, which is so great, but I haven't actually made that many things from this yet, so I'm changing that. And the other night I actually made some more dishes from this. They were mostly cold dishes or room temperature dishes. So I made some Sichuanese green soybean salad, also some cold chicken with Sichuan sauce, and some smacked cucumber salad. And then today I'm gonna make some gung bao chicken, stir-fried mushrooms with garlic, and snow peas with black bean and chili pepper. So I'm excited to try those later. But now we can talk about books because I've been struggling a little bit to pick out what I'm gonna read next because I tried Second Place by Rachel Cusk, but I actually just wasn't gelling with it, and so I decided not to read that. And so I sampled some more things and landed on A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. I read a sample of that and really, really enjoyed it, and so I went ahead and ordered a physical copy, which is arriving today, but it's not here yet, and so I will be reading that later today. But just from that sample, I really enjoyed it. So I featured this book in one of my art-related book recommendation videos, and I'm just really enjoying the writing so far and kind of the general premise. So we start out with this young man arriving in the north of England. He seems to be, it seems like he's from London, but he's a very kind of cosmopolitan kind of person, and so he feels very out of place. So that's always an interesting start, you know, our main character being a bit thrown into a new setting. And he's been hired to restore a mural in a church. And so you kind of get to see him arrive and find a church, and then kind of start walking around the church and assessing the state of the church, these sort of like architectural things he notices about it, the areas that are well preserved and the areas that are not. And so you get a cool sense of the setting, and also you start to get to know him as a person, the things that he is, you know, knowledgeable of, and how he thinks. And then he meets the vicar, which it turns out that the vicar is not in favor of him working on this project or having this project at all, but it's kind of out of his hands. And I'm just really enjoying the writing. It's in first person, and the narrator, who's the main protagonist, is he just has this really kind of wry humor, He seems like an interesting person to get to know. There's definitely a sense that this is the kind of story where it's an older person looking back on their life and talking about things like regret, which seems to be very much my kind of thing. But there's a section in here towards the end of the sample where he is talking to the vicar, and the vicar is concerned that even just the period that he is going to be restoring the mural is going to distract from worship. And so the vicar says, "It will distract attention from worship." And the narrator responds, "Only for a short time," I said. "People tire of color and shapes which stay in the same place, and they always believe that they have more time than they will have, and that someday they'll come on a weekend and have a proper look." I should have said we. I'm just the same. So I just really enjoyed that because it's very true. But I do think that the vicar is kind of right in that when I used to go to church, I definitely used to zone out a lot and just spend a lot of time looking at the beautiful murals and stained glass windows and stuff in churches. But yes, so I'm very intrigued by the premise and like the tone and the writing of the book, so I'm very excited to keep going with it later, and then update you on it at a later time. it's Monday the 23rd, and you'll have seen that I made some cinnamon rolls over the weekend. Very time consuming to make them from scratch, but they come out so delicious. And then I always freeze half of the recipe because it's just for me and Bruce, and so that way we get a second batch for the future. So I'm going to link the recipe in the description in case you want to check it out. But other than that, I have finished some books, and so it's time to update you on those. But before we get to the books, I want to mention the movie I watched last night. It was Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky, and I've watched his movie Mirror before, which I loved, and that one is actually a little bit harder to try to summarize because it's very kind of fragmented. It really mirrors memory and the way that we think of and visualize memory. And so in that way it's very successful, but kind of harder to summarize, where Stalker actually has a bit more of a straightforward kind of narrative, even though the plot is not the point. So Stalker follows a man known only as the Stalker, and stalkers are people who are familiar with this area called the Zone that has been blocked off from the population because it's said to be very dangerous and unpredictable. There's like strange activity happening there after a meteorite fell there in the past. And so stalkers are guides. They take people into the zone and guide them to this place where there is a room that is rumored to fulfill your innermost wishes. So the premise is that Stalker is guiding two men, one known as the Professor, and he's a scientist, and another one called the Writer, and he is guiding them to this room. And really they're just archetypes, and throughout their journey they're engaging in these philosophical and existential discussions to do with the meaning of life, faith, art, nature, the supernatural, and science, things like that. And I just loved it. I really loved Tarkovsky's style. His compositions are just amazing. His design choices always feel so intentional. You know, scenes always communicate so much more than just what's happening. There's always design choices that communicate beyond just the setting. You always feel this amplification of the themes and the emotions that are going on in the scene. His indoor sets have this kind of theater-like feel to them. The textures and the lighting and the framing always feel so intentional. He'll have these very long sort of shots where your mind can just kind of wander and really get into the setting, try to get into the characters' heads and see through their eyes and you know, have that connection to their experiences and what they're feeling in the moment. Or sometimes he'll have the character speak directly to the audience and communicate certain things. Or he'll have pans of these very evocative sort of scenes or scenery. And sometimes he'll have a narrator actually narrating poetry over those. It's just so cool. All these different things that are inspired by other art forms that come together to really transcend your typical kind of expectations of film in a way that I find so profound. And it's really, really cool, really engaging in a really special way. And I just really love it. I think it's really cool. And it's actually available to watch for free on YouTube and a lot of his other movies as well on a channel called Mosfilm. They do like movie restorations and stuff like that, and they have a lot of Soviet and Russian movies on their channel, so I'm going to link to it in case you want to check it out. Next, I'm going to talk about A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. I did finish this, and I ended up really, really enjoying it. It ended up having a somewhat similar premise to An Artist of the Floating World, with that protagonist being an older man looking back on his life, except that this is looking back very specifically at a summer in his early 20s. And there's actually a section in the foreword where he talks about his intention with the book. When making a start on A Month in the Country, my idea was to write an easygoing story, a rural idyll along the lines of Thomas Hardy's Under the Greenwood Tree. And, to establish the right tone of voice to tell such a story, I wanted its narrator to look back regretfully across 40 or 50 years, but, recalling a time irrevocably lost, still feel a tug at the heart. And so I feel like that is very much what this is all about. So in An Artist of the Floating World, you are in the future with the narrator looking back on his life, and he kind of reflects on a lot of things from that point of view. But in this, you are in that moment in the past as it is happening, and the narrator only occasionally comes in with his kind of future consciousness, and usually it's more for the purpose of foreshadowing rather than to really kind of ponder or interpret the things that happened to him in the past. So in this, we're following Tom Birkin, who has been tasked with restoring a mural in a church, and he's very excited about it. It's his first professional job. We very quickly learn that he is haunted by his experiences in the Great War, World War I, and he also has a broken marriage. And so having this task that he knows he's equipped to do, that he is excited to take on this challenge, is very exciting, but also it's like a break from life. He gets to take this summer as a way to kind of escape and give himself some time before he has to go back to his real life in London and start again. And it's funny because he's out in the countryside in the summer, and there's this sort of very idyllic sense to it, but he's definitely not living in luxury. He's working really hard, and he's living in this tower, sleeping on the floor with very little heat and no food and no money. He's getting paid very little money, and yet this is something that feels like a break from life, that is doable and exciting, and that's just a very interesting premise, I think. And he gets so engrossed in it that at one point he says that the inside of the church feels to him like the real world, and the changing scenery outside when he goes outside feels like a dream. And one of my favorite things in here is when he shares what it's like for him to be working on this mural. He says that he feels this kind of kinship with the artist, and how he's sort of like in conversation with him. And I thought that was so cool because it's similar to the way that I think of what it's like when you're doing something like the drawings I was doing that are based on another artist's work, where you really do feel like you're in conversation with them. You're trying to get into their head and see through their eyes, see their vision and their interpretation. And you know, in a small way, you are getting to know them. And there's a really cool quote, I think, where he shares a bit of that. So he says, "You might wonder what I thought about during the hours I spent on that scaffold. Well, obviously the work itself, the vast painting I was uncovering, but also about the nameless man who'd stood where I stood. Not his technical abilities, although quite properly these were extremely interesting to me. For instance, he had a very, very good line in hands. His speciality being knuckles and wrists. His hands spoke to each other and were answered. But he wasn't much good at feet. Let's leave it at that. No, it was his quirks which really fascinated me. And when, for instance, he dropped iconographic rules to shyly lift the line of a man's lips, or turned aside to rattle off a string of grace notes on a costume's edge. Things just done for the hell of it." Which I love so much, because he's talking about those specific little things that you notice when you are observing someone's work so closely. You really learn the things that they clearly love, the things that fascinate them, that they're interested in, that they've taken the time to really create with love. And you notice the ones where they're kind of less interested and that kind of thing, which I just think it's so cool. And I love when you feel those kinds of connections with what you're reading and your real life. But this is definitely not just about his work on the mural. You get to follow him as he also gets to meet lots of different people in the town and the relationships he builds with them, and what those are like. It's like a snapshot in time, you know, like memories, thinking back on memories and how bittersweet they can feel, and also very fleeting. They feel so present, and then before you know it, they're gone. And so yes, at times bittersweet, and kind of contemplative, but also really funny as well. There's this wry humor at times that helps kind of balance things out. So yeah, I ended up enjoying this a lot as well, and very on par with the art themes in this. So next, I finished Invitation to a Banquet, which was the audiobook. So I hope that you enjoyed seeing all the different foods that I made inspired by listening to this audiobook. So I also ended up really enjoying this. It is essentially a history of Chinese food, but it manages to do a lot more than just that. It starts out by giving a very brief history of Chinese fast food as it is mostly known in the West, especially in England and the US, which, you know, that kind of food is as traditionally Chinese as something like Taco Bell is traditionally Mexican, so like not very. So the book uses 30 dishes that are then divided into further sections to talk about all kinds of aspects of Chinese cuisine, culture, and history. So it mentions specific ingredients, some that are ubiquitous to Chinese cuisine overall, and then ones that are a lot more regional, and then talk about their backgrounds and their different uses, how they were kind of developed over time, and then also if they are native to the region or if they are imports, like chilies from Mexico or flour and flour milling techniques from Central Asia. And one of my favorite sections is on cooking techniques, which I absolutely love learning about, knowing kind of why things are done a certain way to get certain results, the difficulty in mastering those things and how it all works, what it entails and how those things were developed. All those kinds of things I think are so fascinating. And Fuchsia is so descriptive about the dishes themselves, the experience of eating them, and also the places where they are served and made, because she talks about how she went to all of these different places where the dishes are made to research, and so, you know, she gets to talk about her experiences not just with the dishes themselves, but with the place they're from. And so she describes the setting and also the people that she talks to about all these different things, because she talks about professionals who prepare the food and are knowledgeable in that way, and then also people who are just locals and maybe just cook at home and know about the region and the ingredients and stuff like that. And I love that she mixes that, you know, her experiences along with very thorough research to create something that is so engaging. It's not a short audiobook, but it never got boring. And I appreciate that she also talks about prejudices and misconceptions and hypocrisies within the culinary world, especially in the West towards China and Chinese food, because it's very true. I feel like a lot of people don't know that Chinese cuisine has been so concerned with very elevated kind of cooking techniques and technologies for a really long time. Like, for example, they've been very concerned with creating vegan and vegetarian dishes and developing things like, you know, substitute dishes and ingredients for a really long time, which is now a very, you know, a very popular thing, but they've been on that for a long time. And like I mentioned before, it's just a very interesting way to learn about a different culture through their food, because it's such a unifying factor, you know, we all eat. And so even though there are differences there, it's a really kind of cool avenue to get to see through their eyes at the rest of the world and kind of learn something new in that way. I feel like it's a very enriching kind of thing, and for me it just, you know, kind of expands my worldview and makes me more understanding. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. So I finished 3 books for the vlog. I am very happy with that. So I am going to end it here. And so I hope that you enjoyed seeing all the artsy things that I got up to. I know I really had a very fun time. I really kept in mind Framed in September, the art readathon throughout this whole month. And I mean, I still am. But it was cool. It made me kind of appreciate all of these things that I do tend to do pretty often, but just appreciate them kind of in a special way. And I also got to share them with you, so that's cool. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.